Everyone wants to know whether the future is already determined or whether what I do now is going to have an effect. It's an obvious and natural question. Begin with the thought that this moment in time, this incarnation, this body, this personality, and all that goes with it is something that you've been building up to for a very long time. You've had countless incarnations before this one, each of which was as real to you at the time that you were doing it as this one is to you right now. And when those incarnations end, even though we don't carry all the detailed memory of what happened to us in the past, it's a it's recorded in our chakras as an energy pattern, and the energy of who we are is what we take with us from lifetime to lifetime. In the Bible, just before Jesus was crucified, he makes the extraordinary statement in terms of, should I try to escape this? Is this something that shouldn't be happening? And then he seizes the moment with his all the Christ-like power that he had, and he said, "For this hour was I born." And when you hear that, you imagine the sound of the trumpets and the hordes of angels and everyone's acclaiming Christ and his power and his declaration of truth. Well, here is something extremely interesting and important to contemplate. Wherever you are right now, whatever you're facing, whatever you're going through, for this hour were you born. You've been working up to it for thousands of incarnations, not just a handful. For thousands of incarnations, you have been working your way from delusion to enlightenment. Christ himself, Jesus, was a God-realized master. Jesus is an individual soul exactly like you and me, but he's an awakened one. He went through all the experiences that we're presently going through and learned every lesson there was to learn about the nature of truth, the nature of God, where happiness comes from, what causes suffering, the extraordinary inner power that we have within us, untapped until we awaken to it. We're on exactly the same path. Our destiny is to become God-realized masters. So we are moving. Every experience that we have is sent to us by the divine, attracted by our own superconscious commitment to fulfilling our own destiny. And for this hour were we born. Right now, all the forces are focused for us to be able to choose the right consciousness. And so it's an interesting mix of predetermined and also the free will to decide how we're going to respond. Circumstances, to a large extent, we're not in control entirely of the external world. There's also group karma, national karma, family karma, all the different things that come with it once we choose a body. And we choose a body because it matches in some way the karmic lessons that we've come here to learn. And that's not to say you're being punished. We're just simply getting what is appropriate for the opportunity to learn. See, the whole story depends on understanding what is the purpose of life. The ego wants things to be easy and pleasurable and to match our desires. The superconscious self, the soul nature, the jiva is the Sanskrit word for our enduring individuality. The jiva wants to learn every lesson it can learn in order to achieve the final goal. And that's what we're doing here. And you have to think of it in terms of, because we're not a blank slate, there's a vast amount of momentum. So think of it like this. You're going down the highway. You're trying to go somewhere maybe you've never been before. You suddenly realize that you've sailed past the exit. And you know that that's the exit that you want, but the momentum of going forward with your foot on the gas and as fast as you're driving, the momentum prevents you from responding to that input that says, oh no, that's what I want to do. But because of the momentum, you miss it. You miss the opportunity. You make a mistake. In other words, a mistake in terms of where you're trying to get. what your ultimate goal is. And as happened to me not too long ago, when that exact thing happened, then I found a way to get off of the freeway, but then I ran into road work, and then the next um, on ramp back to the freeway was not available, and I had to go to the other one. And then I got on, and the traffic in the other direction was going the other way. And then when I finally got to where I was going, I completely missed my appointment. But every part of it was part of what had to happen. And it wasn't even that I didn't know what I was trying to do, but momentum put many, many obstacles in my way of being able to achieve it. I persevered. So, in that sense, I was victorious, even though I was dismayed. I persevered. I didn't get my external goal, but I trained myself to persevere against obstacles. So, what was the lesson? Was the lesson merely to persevere against obstacles, or was it actually to keep the appointment? We don't even know a lot of times what the lesson is. Now, the free will is, as I was saying, it's kind of a mixed bag, because we think of free will as absolute. It's just like it's a blank slate and I can choose anything. Common sense tells you you can't. We're always limited by the languages that we know, the age of our body, the talents that we've developed, the influences in our lives. Free will just doesn't exist in an absolute vacuum. So it's working with the momentum that is already in place to train ourselves to choose our response to what happens to us. In other words, to choose our state of consciousness. That's what we get to decide. We get to decide whether I allow the circumstances of my life to break my spirit and cause me to lose energy and lose my connection with faith in God, with my own inner happiness, with my optimism and my hope, or whether, come what may, no matter what momentum is already in place, which magnetizes to me all these obstacles, I still choose. I choose happiness. I choose willingness. I choose putting out more energy. I choose to believe that if I persevere, for this hour was I born, this is not a mistake. This is what faith is. Faith is in understanding that my life is part of a much greater reality. Then this little tiny perspective I have on it is simply not enough for me to know what's really happening. But even to understand that greater perspective, recently I heard a perspective given, offered by someone who'd had a death and return experience. And after the return, it was the woman Anita, I believe is her name. Last name begins with an M. Unfortunately, I can't quite remember, but I want to give credit where credit is due. It's a very, very well-known death and return experience. She was saying that the way we live on this side of the veil, so to speak, when we're in one body and deeply identified with it, she said, is being inside an enormous warehouse that is just filled with so many things, but it's completely dark, and all we have is a small flashlight. So we operate in our lives with what our small flashlight will reveal, and we think that's the whole context of what we're doing. She said her death experience was somebody just went over and turned on a bright light, and all of a sudden she was conscious of the entire warehouse, and she could feel that everything that was in that huge warehouse, even though it had been invisible to her up till this time, was completely connected to who she was right then. For this hour was I born. And then she was asked, well, what happens when you come back to this side? She said, well, the light in the warehouse is no longer on. I can't perceive all those realities. I'm still just operating with my flashlight, except I know that all of the rest of it is there now. And I feel that I am so much bigger than what I am here, that even the little things that I do here are part of this greater pattern. So that's the destiny part of it. We have this trajectory. We are rivers seeking the sea. And that's a beautiful analogy for what our lives really are. The river may go through countless variations, up and down hills, be trapped in whirlpools and escape from the whirlpool. But from the moment the drop of water falls to the earth, the river is seeking the sea. That's us. We're always seeking the sea. And our choice is whether we consciously embrace that or put our heads in a bucket and pretend it's not happening. And that's our free will to choose our response. A friend of mine was asked, he was in a role similar to mine, and he was sharing these teachings, and someone asked him, are you a God realized master? He said, no, of course not. What has this path given you? And do you have any powers? That was the question that was actually asked. Do you have any miraculous powers? And he was a very thoughtful man. And he reflected for a moment. And then his first answer was going to be no. He can't turn water into wine. He can't raise the dead. He can't make the blind see like Jesus and others like him, like Jesus could do. But he thought for a moment and he said, yes, I have one power. He said that is worth everything. He said, I have the power to choose happiness. You see, that's where our free will comes in. Not in necessarily making the world agree with us, but in recognizing that Divine Mother is in charge and everything that is happening for this hour was I born. And to embrace that wholeheartedly, whole-mindedly, whole spirit, that's our free will, and that's what we should cultivate with every ounce of our energy. God bless you, my friends.